This is my history of Harley-Davidson ownership through a lot of my life, both in joy and frustration. I can't really start this story with just my ownership. My first home was a trailer in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and outside was a Mustang, and yes, a 66 Harley Davidson Sportster, my dad's. This was Dad's second Harley. His first Harley was a 56 K Model, which was kind of the precursor to a Sportster, and he had that when he was up here in Iowa, and the back brakes had a tendency to just lock up. The bike would, of course, die for no apparent reason and take forever to start too, but the real thing was that that back brake tended to lock up when you breathe on it, it would lock. But the guy he sold it to died within a week or two of owning it. So Dad said there was a large skid mark near the site of the accident. His guess was that the back brake locked up on the guy, as was common to the bike, and that's probably what cost him his life. While down in Florida, he had the 66 Sportster, and the first day he had it, he had his buddy in the back. They'd been at the bar. They were out zipping down the blacktop, and some evil Honda tried to pass him or something, so he felt the need to go over and blow him off the road, and the red and blue light show came on behind him, and he was given an improper lane change, which was basically code for racing. He had a lot of fun on the bike. Him and my uncle would get tuned up in Lauderdale and then go drive to the Keys randomly at 4 in the morning, and sometimes Dad would forget to put his kickstand down, or he would slide up to the gas pump on the side. They were coming back from the Keys at Christmas Day one year, and the traffic was horrible, just 2-lane road. So Dad basically put his bike on the center line and rode the center all the way back up until traffic kind of opened up. My uncle had a little bit more sense, and he just hung to the back. So you can see that the lid doesn't fall far from the whiskey bottle. Dad sold that 66 Sportster when I was born, and he and Mom and I moved back from Lauderdale back to Iowa.
Then there's the guy that bought the Sportster from Dad. Now this guy was known for not having really good luck. He's already got one glass eye from, I don't know what accident happened there. He buys Dad's Sportster down in Florida, and he's gonna ride it back to Iowa. So on the way, he happens to turn his head sideways, and his glass eye goes flying out down the road and loses it. Then he gets to a point where the bike died, which, old Harley, it's gonna happen. So his bike died. He rolls it behind like a billboard and some bushes to hide it until he can, get a ride back, get it fixed. So while he's trying to hitch a ride to find somebody to help repair his bike, he gets picked up by these dudes who end up beating the hell out of him and stealing his money. And when he finally gets, recovers from all that, then he goes to get a ride. He goes back to the bike, and somebody had stole it while it was sitting there hiding. So the moral of the story is never buy a bike from my dad.
It wasn't until I was 18 when I went out and bought my first motorcycle, which wasn't what I wanted, it was what I could afford. And Dad was very unhappy about it. He came out of the garage, threw a wrench down, and says, "You bought a fucking Honda?" It wasn't that I disobeyed him about buying a bike, it was that I bought a Honda. I'd never owned either, so I didn't really understand at the time. I just knew I had a bike that I could afford. Fast forward a few months to Thanksgiving break, home from college that fall, and Dad throws me in the truck and says, "Hey, let's go over and look at this bike." Outside was this blue 77 Sportster. Tons of chrome on this bike. I'd never seen that much chrome on a bike before, with the blue painted sheet metal. Making a deal, I bought it for like $1,700, I think, back then. And I drove it home while he drove the truck home. Well, in town, Kyle was the real biker, like had an amputated leg because he got I think he wrecked a trike. Took his bike down in his basement, repainted it, rebuilt the engine every winter. True biker. Well, he sees me riding the bike, follows us home, gets out, holds out his hand, says, "Congratulations on your first Harley." And I said, "Well, it's his." He's like, "Son of a bitch, never too old." So I was happy for Dad, but I was kind of disappointed in myself. And
while the old General Shovelhead XLCH was getting its, 5th engine put into it and repaired, I was kind of down for the count because that was my main vehicle. I had one car and it wasn't really suitable for daily driving. So Dad and my uncle brought down his Sportster for me to drive in the meantime. The first day I'm driving to work, the front exhaust pipe vibrates off and falls. So I ended up having to pull over in the dark, in the middle of some back road, and basically I took Dad's tools out, and I found a road map. So I used the road map like a hot pad to grab the exhaust pipe, put it back on, and try to get it good enough to get to work where I could then wait for it to cool off, get some wrenches, and fix it properly. It was one of those band clamps, if I remember right, and it just come loose. Once the General was back on the road, I decided I wanted to kind of spruce up Dad's bike for him letting me use it for that time. So what I started by doing was a couple mechanical things, like I replaced the rear sprocket. It was one of those where you have to rivet in place. And I also tried to repair some of the wiring that was pretty messed up, especially along underneath the tank. It already shorted against the frame and caught on fire on him on the way down Main Street one day. So I tried to fix all that as much as I could, make sure the basics were there. He had, I believe, a Bendix carburetor on the thing, and it had an adjustable main jet. It had been added. It just didn't run very smooth, so I spent a lot of time trying to get that thing tuned right. It actually ran pretty decent and smooth once I got done with it. The one screw up I did there is I'd been down on my hands and knees working on the carburetor while the bike was cold. Well, then I took it out for a test run up and down the block a few times, came back, immediately went to grab the exhaust pipe to push myself up the same way, and I ended up with a blister this entire palm like an idiot. I also replaced the seat on it with something a little bit nicer that wasn't shredded. One of the most noticeable changes is, of course, the paint job. He'd always kind of said that he liked the red paint on my General, and I ended up using like a Euro red, but I put some ice pearl red flake on it to give it just a little bit sparkle. And you have to be careful with that ice pearl red, because if you get too much, it'll look pink. So I put just a dusting on it to give it a little bit of sparkle in the sun. And he'd always mentioned that a lot of the modern paint jobs in Chopper World were too gaudy, you know, bright stripes, checkered flags, stuff like that, that he didn't want for, you know, a 70s bike. So what I ended up doing is I stuck with the same Sportster decals on the tank and the Harley decal on the oil tank. And what I did is I airbrushed them on the red base instead. So I used the same shapes, but I used a diamond tread pattern. So I sprayed it in diamond tread, and then I put a couple rusty rivets where I used some root beer and tangerine candy to kind of make it look like a rust effect. And then I pinstriped in orange with drop shadows all the way around both of them. And even though it was kind of an earlier paint job, it's still one of the more prouder paint jobs. Then I had to get it up in the soon-to-be ex-wife's truck, and I had a couple planks. The guy at Home Depot said they'd hold up. Well, they didn't. They bowed like hell. Put it with a cinder block under one of the planks, get a running start, jump into the back of the truck, and I had too much speed and couldn't stop. So I basically ended up hitting the back window of the truck, the cab, and chipping that a little bit. And then when we got to Iowa, I backed it up at the implement shop, had like a loading dock. So Dad, you know, we rolled it off there, rolled it down the ramp, and it's all gravel. What's Dad do? Taking out first thing, dumps the clutch, and he's spinning the tire all the way out onto the main road. It's like, well, hope he doesn't chip that paint.
Fast forward, I don't have a Harley for many years until about 2006, and I've got the chopper shop down in Florida at this time, but I wanted a bike for myself to just cruise around on, so I bought this little Sportster Hugger. It started as an 883, but the guy I bought it from had worked at Harley, so he'd already gone through, he punched it up to a 1200, he had new pipes on it, a new ignition, new cams, Thunderslide kit on the carburetor. He painted it black with like a silver skull on the tank. He put on a Night Train rear wheel and a Night Train front end, and it turned 92 horsepower, which is pretty good for a little Sportster. Bike was actually a blast. It was so short that I could walk up behind it and just sit down on it. While I had it, I did quite a bit of work. One of the first things I did is I took the gas tank, modified it to look like an axe kind of profile, and it sort of mimicked how a sport bike has, like, you know, kind of knee inserts. Painted a white and blue realistic flame job on it. I messed around a little bit with different bars. Like I tried going from the risers and handlebars to clip-on bars. The clip-ons weren't really great because it was like you just got shot in the stomach with a cannonball, and it was just hell on my back, unfortunately. So I ended up going back to normal bars. I even tried mid controls, but with the clip-ons in my size, it just wasn't practical. But just had a blast on the bike. It had a belt drive when I got it, and I hated belts, and sure enough, it wasn't long and the belt snapped on me out on the road. So I went to chain and sprockets and never looked back. At some point I had my first open heart surgery, and after surgery, I knew myself and I figured it was best to disable the bike so that I wouldn't be riding it until my sternum was healed. I took the bike apart. I got rid of the rear taillight and license plate mount and all that, and just made a shorter fender with a little devil tail point. I ended up putting a axle mounted plate holder and taillight. I repainted the whole thing black, and I put these devil chicks on it, like she-devils, and a realistic orange flame paint job. I did a baseball mitt seat with the Anarchy symbol there. I painted a red Anarchy symbol on the derby cover and on the oil tank to match the seat, but also match the red everywhere. I cut the exhaust pipes down to the same length, tried tuning them. There's an old trick with a wax pen on the exhaust pipe. You go ride it, you see where it's melted, that's your hot spot, that's where you want to cut the pipes. So I cut both of them the same length and had a tuned exhaust, put a nice little point on it to flatten out the torque curve, and then did a black exhaust wrap, which gave it kind of a ratty, look. It was all basically blacked out. I blacked out everything. So this is kind of, just right at the early stage where the kind of murdered chopper look is becoming popular, and the industry was starting to go from the Pro Street fancy chrome everything to the blacked out little cafe racers. Really no problems to speak of. It was a pretty reliable little bike. Eventually, after building this gripper chopper and being limited on garage space, I ended up selling that bike at a gun show, actually. I'll soon be posting a video on all the choppers that I built while I had my shop, Whitechrome Customs, in Florida as well, and that link will be in the description of the video below. So until then, keep the shiny side up.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel below and let's celebrate turning fuel and air into adrenaline.